Hi everyone, welcome to GTech Techno Solution Private Limited. We are going to discuss about bone growth and classification of bones of human skeletal system. So these are the topics that we are going to cover in this session. We'll be seeing about bone growth, followed by the bony structures. Then we'll be learning about the skull. We'll also learn about the spinal column, followed by the sacrum and the rib cage. So these are the topics that we are going to cover. First, we are going to see about bone growth. The different stages of the bone growth are as follows. The process of bone growth is known as ossification. And ossification will lead to the growth of bone in an infant. The next stage is intramembranous ossification. In intramembranous ossification, the bones begin growing as tough and fibrous membrane from the cartilage. The cells that form the bone is known as osteoblasts, and they turn the membrane in the infant to bone. So, the membrane such as mesenchyme is converted into a bone by the osteoblast cells. Our next stage is endochondral ossification. If you see, in the various stages of bone growth, initially we'll have a cartilage developed from the membrane. So from the cartilage, your bone will be developed by the osteoblasts in the primary ossification center, as you can see over here, which is developed into this portion with a blood vessel and as bone. So this development is done by your osteoblasts, and your primary ossification center is nothing but your endochondral ossification. At this stage, you will have your diaphysis to be formed from the cartilage into a complete bone. So, the initial development of the diaphysis is what takes place in the primary ossification stage. In our secondary ossification center, that is the next stage, your epiphysis. In a bone, the middle portion, that is your shaft, is known as your diaphysis, and the heads on either ends are known as your epiphysis. So, In a bone development, the development from the cartilage starts in your diaphysis stage in your primary ossification, followed by the development in your epiphysis in your secondary ossification stage. So thus, the bones with some cartilage between the epiphysis and the diaphysis will continue to grow. So this is what happens in your secondary ossification center. If you see, we have a medullary cavity and spaces in your cancellous bone. So, the cells that form the holes in the bone are called as your osteoclasts. Your osteoclasts are nothing but a large multinucleate bone cell which absorbs the bone during growth and healing. So as you can see, your osteoclasts will help in the bone growth and they form holes in the bone. So this is your final stage. We are going to see how to build better bones. To have a healthy bone, we should follow the diet which is filled with calcium and vitamin D. If you want to build better bones, using exercises, then we have weight bearing and strength training to be the exercises which you have to perform in order to have a good bone health. For a bone healthy lifestyle, we should avoid smoking and alcohol consumption, as these two factors will affect the growth of healthy bones. The certain tests which can be conducted in order to see the growth of the bone, we have a bone density test and bone scans. So these are the general tests that can be performed to monitor the healthy growth of bone. On performing these tests, we can diagnose the following problems in bone. We can identify if there is a bone pain or if there is arthritis. We can also detect whether the person has any bone infection or if there are bone cancers located in the bone cells. So these problems can be diagnosed by performing the following tests. The bony structures are rigid foundations and our bones, projections and processes. Processes are nothing but prominent projections. For muscle and ligament attachment, your bone provides a structure. If your bone has depressions and hollows, then they are for articulations, that is nothing but the connection of bones at joints. The openings that are present in your bone is for blood vessels and nerves to pass through the bones to supply them with enough amount of blood for their growth. We are going to see the various terms and the definitions which can be used to define the bone structures. First, we have condyle. Condyle is nothing but a rounded process, that is a prominent projection that usually articulates with another bone. Next, we have crest, which is a narrow, ridge-like projection. Followed by crest, we have epicondyle, a projection that is situated above the condyle. Next, we have a foramen, which is an opening through a bone that is usually a passageway for your blood vessels, nerves or ligaments to penetrate and grab on. Our next term is fossa, a relatively deep pit or depression. The term head of a bone is used to define the large enlargement on the end of a bone. Process of a bone is the prominent projection of a bone structure. Suture is nothing but an interlocking line of union between bones. Trochanter is a relatively large process, that is, a large prominent projection. Tubercle is a small knob-like process. If it is tuberosity, a knob-like process is usually larger than a tubercle. So these are the terms which are used to define the bone structures. Next, we are going to see about the human skull. The human skull is made up of two types of bones, the cranial bone and the facial bones. The cranial bones are the bones that form the top sides and the back of the skull. Your facial bones are the bones that form the face. Soft spots are the region that are felt in an infant skull, and they are known as fontanelles. Fontanelles are the tough membrane that connects the incompletely developed bones, and it is usually found in infants. Hence, this region of infants are very gentle, and so we have to handle them with care over this region. Next, we are going to see the cranial bones located in a human skull. The bone frontal is in the anterior portion of the human skull. Occipital is a bone that is located at the back of the human skull. Parietal is a bone that is located in the top and mostly sides of the human skull. Temporal are the bones that form the lower sides of the skull over here. Your sphenoid and ethmoid bones are found on the floor of the human skull. So these are the major bones that make up your cranial bones. The smallest bones of the body in a human can be found in your ear, and they are collectively known as ear ossicles. And those bones are malleus, incus and stapes. So if you see in your ear, this portion has been enlarged into this. So if you see, we have the three smallest bone of a human body, which includes the malleus, incus and the stapes. So these are the three bones which are the smallest bones of the body. Next we are going to see the facial bones of a skull. Mandible is the bone that you can find in your lower jaw. Maxillae is the bone that you can find in your upper jaw. Zygomatic is the bone that you can find in your cheek on either side of the human skull. Palatine is found in the anterior portion of palate. Next we have vomer, a thin bone that divides the nasal cavity, and it is found near the nose. The nasal bones, they fuse together in order to form the bridge of the nose. So these are the facial bones in a human skull. Next we are going to see about the spinal column. In a human spinal column, which is also known as vertebrae, there are 7 cervical vertebrae, 12 thoracic vertebrae. As you can see, there are 7 cervical vertebrae, 12 thoracic vertebrae as it is located near the thorax of a human body, 5 lumbar vertebrae, which forms the lower portion of your vertebral column, followed by sacrum, which is nothing but 5 fused vertebrae and coccyx, 3 fused vertebrae. So this is how a human spinal column is classified into vertebrae. So the diagram over here clearly depicts how the vertebral column is divided as cervical vertebrae, thoracic, lumbar and sacrum and coccyx vertebrae. So this diagram clearly depicts how the spinal cord has the various sections of vertebrae, that is your 7 cervical vertebrae, 12 thoracic vertebrae, 5 lumbar vertebrae, 5 sacral and 4 coccygeal vertebrae. Our spinal column's cervical vertebrae is located in the neck region, and it is the smallest and lightest vertebrae. The first one in your cervical vertebrae is known as the atlas, and the second one is known as the axis. In your thoracic vertebrae, they join the 12 pairs of ribs in your rib cage. Your lumbar vertebrae have sturdy structures to support the hip region of a human. The sacrum, which is found in the end of your vertebral column, is triangular shaped, and it consists of 5 fused vertebrae, whereas your coccyx, it is found at the endmost of your vertebral column. It is a small triangular shaped bone, and it is made up of 3 to 5 fused vertebrae. It is more commonly known as the tailbone, and it is not of much importance. Here we have a detailed description of sacrum in pictorial representation. So these are the various parts of a sacrum: the sacral canal, the body of the sacrum, the lateral sacral crest, the apex of the sacrum, and the tail bone, that is your coccyx. We can see the body of the first sacral vertebra over here, and these projections are known as your median sacral crest. Next we are going to see about the rib cage in a human skeletal system. A typical human rib cage consists of 24 ribs. In total, which includes the sternum with the xiphoid process, that is, this portion is your xiphoid process, and the costal cartilages, and 12 thoracic vertebrae, together with the skin and the associated fascia and muscles. The rib cage will make up the thoracic wall, which provides the structure and the attachment for the muscles of the neck, thorax, upper abdomen and the back. So the rib cage is one of the most important bone set in a human body, as it encloses the lungs, the heart and the upper abdomen. The ribs at the end are known as the floating ribs. If you see, the ribs in the first 7 are attached to the sternum. This portion is your sternum, and the first 7 ribs that are attached to the sternum are known as the true ribs. That is your breastbone. They are also known as sternal ribs. The lower 5 ribs that do not directly connect to the sternum are known as your false ribs. They are not directly connected, hence they are known as false ribs. The lower lips, which are not attached directly to the breastbone, are known as the floating ribs. Here, 11 and 12 are known as the floating ribs. Next we have the sternum, which is the breastplate. Your sternum is over here and it forms the front middle portion of the rib cage. It joins with the clavicle and most of the ribs, that is the true ribs. And it is one of the important parts in a rib cage. The xiphoid process or sternum, or it is also known as metasternum, is a small cartilaginous process, that is an extension of the lower part of the sternum, which is usually ossified in adult human, and it is also referred to as ensiform process. So this extension in your sternum is the xiphoid process. Thank you so much for joining GTech on bone growth and classification of bones. Hope you would have got a very good idea about how the bone grows and how they are classified. Thank you.